Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about childhood trauma and the concept of the golden shadow and psychological protectors that show up when we start doing work on the unconscious mind. This video was inspired basically by a TikTok that blew up, and I felt like I needed to make a full video on this, so here we go. But basically, there is this theme that when people with childhood or developmental trauma go to do shadow work, there's always this fear that there's something dark or evil and scary and bad inside of me. And it kind of hinders people from the work. And I totally get that. I definitely felt this way when I was on my healing journey, that there were some parts of me that were just like so dark and so awful that, once I started to do the work and dug and dug and dug, I was going to find something just like horrendous at the bottom of the pit. Like there would be something there that would be like, oh my God, this is why I'm so fucked up, right? And it kind of scared me off from doing some of this deep inner work. But here's what I discovered is 99% of the time when I'm doing shadow work or parts work with people that have developmental or childhood trauma, what we're really excavating is your golden shadow. Basically, these are the parts of you that were like too bright, too sensitive, too joyful, or maybe too intuitive to feel safe in your childhood environment. And it's this concept that like most of what's in your shadow, especially if you've had childhood trauma, are these really like beautiful, bright pieces of your spirit and your personality and your true self. And there were so many people who commented on this video that just felt really seen and feeling really tender about it. But then I also had people that were like, no, but I actually have some like dark, evil shit in me. And I don't know if it's because of my trauma or what. So we're also going to talk about that. When you come up against these dark parts in your psyche, what is really going on? But first, I want to talk a little bit more about the golden shadow. So when Carl Jung talked about the shadow, it's basically everything that your ego does not identify with. So any repressed aspects of your personality get buried basically in your unconscious mind. But if you grew up in a dysfunctional, abusive, unemotionally neglectful environment, or perhaps you had some complex trauma that you experienced as a child, you're not just repressing things like anger or jealousy or some of these like heavier, darker emotions. You're actually repressing like your goodness, like your creativity, your empathy, your playfulness, your intuition. Because at the time when you were a child, to express those things did not feel safe. When your environment either punished or maybe just did not attune to your sensitivity, your system basically learns like, we can't show that, we might not survive. I identify with this so much. I was a highly sensitive child. I remember getting made fun of when I was really young for being a crybaby. Like that's like really like etched into my memory that like I cried too much. And then after my series of traumas, it was just, I remember feeling so unsafe in my body. And that the fact that my intuition and like my somatic empathy was telling me something was off in this experience I was having with a family member that was sexually abusing me. And the response from that was like my whole entire family broke up, and in my little 8-year-old mind, it was my fault. So it led to this, like, I can't trust my intuition. I have to be hyper vigilant to stay safe. Even going into my teenage years, I almost got this really hard exterior where, people go into fight, flight, freeze. I was like fight all the time. I was kind of a bully. So I had these very like dark adaptive parts show up. So we're going to talk about that. But essentially what you need to know is when you come across this darkness, it's not something that's like innately wrong or wounded with you. It's usually protectors in your psyche that are holding guard, like standing in front of your golden shadow, trying to protect the child. And a lot of times these parts of your psyche still think that you're like 5 years old. Now, I know I talk a lot about Jungian psychology on this channel, but I have also really been bringing IFS, parts work into my practice, especially with people that have had developmental trauma, complex trauma, because there tends to be a fragmentation sometimes of the psyche. And just so you know, it's like a protective thing that your psyche does. It's actually like doing the right thing, even though if it feels frustrating later in life. But to understand that your system is essentially like a bunch of sub-personalities, right? All working together in your psyche. In Jungian psychology, we would probably call this like archetypes or complexes, right? That there are these energies and roles that are all kind of working together to make up your personality expression. And I'm going to put a little graphic up so that you can kind of see what I'm talking about. I'm going to put it up maybe over here, but this graph kind of shows the way that the IFS methodology kind of looks at the psyche. And I do find that it's very useful to understand your psyche in this way, especially if you've had childhood trauma. So the self, the capital S self, or in Jungian psychology, we would call it the true self. It's the part of you that exists beyond your ego. It's the part of you that's calm. It's the part of you that's curious. It's the part of you that's connected and compassionate, confident, right? And then we have the exiles, which generally is like your inner child. Okay. Just think about exiles as like your inner child parts, or parts of your personality, or even emotions that weren't allowed to be felt that get pushed down into the shadow. Right. And the way that I always see it, I had a lot of dreams about this where there'd be like little kids in cages and stuff, and feeling very like worried for them. Like that's like actually really good imagery, is that like you have these very innocent parts that are behind bars essentially in your psyche, and then you have these protectors that are manning the station. Okay, so the most common ones are kind of like these manager parts. And this is the parts of us that want to control, that want to overdo, overplan, be a perfectionist, people please, all of that stuff, right? There's like, you're trying to manage, everything so that you don't get triggered or that inner child stays safe. Now, if you're somebody that's like, I have this like dark inner part, yeah, you probably have one. So it's either, you'll see that there'll be this like kind of like dark or loathsome kind of protector, and it's either criticizing other people or it's turning inwards and you're criticizing yourself. And this can get really, really dark, especially if you've had a lot of childhood trauma. I don't even want to say a lot of childhood trauma. You had trauma that was too much, too fast, too soon. It was too much for your system. So the protectors end up becoming like really rigid and sometimes really scary, I guess. But like understand that they think that they're doing their job. They think that you're still 5 years old. And yeah, I remember I had this like judge and criticize others protector part where I had mean thoughts about other people. I was constantly judging people. If somebody wronged me in any way, oh God forbid. My nickname in my 20s was the Badger because I just didn't give a fuck, and I would start fights, and that was my protector coming out to keep me safe. Okay. Now, the other side of that is this internal criticism. It's that feeling like I'm a loser, I'm worth nothing, nobody loves me, I don't fit in, I don't belong here. This is where you can start to actually go into like suicidal tendencies. Generally, when you get to that, it's like, and I've been there, I know, but it really is trying to protect you from feeling pain or feeling loss or feeling vulnerable. And then there are protectors that they call firefighters. And I guess my like angry, rageful, kind of reactive part that would come up would be considered a firefighter because, yeah, as you can see on this graph here, it's like rage, self-harm, binge eating, oversleeping, over shopping, disassociating, compulsions, video games, all of this stuff. These are reactive protectors that want to distract us or shut down negative thoughts or feelings that come up when the exiles are triggered. So this is another thing to look to. Some people, when they look at like, oh my gosh, my relationship with food or my relationship with alcohol, it's like a personal failing and I must be an addict. And like, there's all of this, BS around that where people are taking it on as like, oh, this must be just like who I am and part of my identity. It's not. They're adaptive parts that are seeping in to try to protect the exiled parts of you. Okay. And like I said, like my firefighters were like super vicious, to the point where I almost thought like maybe there was something wrong with me. Like I would have like really, really violent fantasies sometimes, like just being real. And now looking back, I was like, oh, I totally see what was going on. And for my personal experience is I had a lot of that suicidal stuff earlier, like early high school and stuff. There were years where I wanted to end my own life. And then this is what I believe happened as a protection mechanism so that I didn't kill myself. The rage went outwards instead. Okay. In a weird way, that was also protecting me, because I think that if this self-critical voice would have kept going, I might have ended my own life. And yeah, the voice just changed suddenly, where it wasn't really attacking me anymore, but it was attacking everything around me. And I almost fell into, I would say, like a version of narcissism, to be honest, where my ego was really running the show. I was very like self-focused, selfish, and, everybody else was the problem. But here's the paradox of trauma, is that the psyche builds these monsters to guard the treasure, okay? And the real work here is when we start asking these parts like, hey, what are you protecting, right? What are you afraid is going to happen if you don't do this, or if you don't say this to me or make me feel this way, or if I stop binge eating or drinking, what are you afraid I'm going to feel? What are you afraid is going to happen? And then you always also want to ask these parts as well, like, how old do you think I am? Because again, a lot of times these protective parts, they're just outdated structures, again, that still think you are a child. And you can find a lot by just dialoguing with these parts. And you can work with an IFS practitioner or a shadow work coach like myself to start this inquiry, because sometimes we'll have enough ego defenses that will be hard for us to even like dialogue with our parts without a third party. But you technically can, right, connect with these parts. There are certain ways you can do it with, like, for example, free writing, like write as the part, let them say everything that they want to say. You can do an active imagination visualization, pull in the image of the part, see what form they take, see what they feel, what their story is, let them express themselves. Also, you can do it through art, paint the part, right? See what comes through intuitively that will give you more information about why this part exists. And this also helps like disconnect your identity from behavior that's been adaptive to protect you. And that's the biggest thing too, right? Is understanding that these parts do have good intentions, even though if you feel like they're fucking up your life or they're ruining your life, they want to be acknowledged for their hard work, So you have to really go into this with an open mind, an open heart, with curiosity, with compassion, non-judgment, right? To really find out what's going on here. Now, there's another kind of like maybe critical voice in your head or thing that maybe doesn't feel like this is totally a part of your system. And this is where you start to get into like legacy burdens, is what IFS would call it. But it's basically like ancestral thought forms or parts that have been ingrained into your psyche. And it can be just from your family. Again, like maybe your family had beliefs like crying is weak, or power is dangerous, or you have to earn love, or you have to work really hard to make money, or whatever, right? There are these beliefs that get drilled into your system based on your ancestral pain bodies, basically. Or you might have a harsh inner critic that actually mirrors like an abusive parent's voice or something like that. I've seen that happen. Or there's maybe this self-sabotaging part that thinks success is terrifying because maybe your ancestors were punished for standing out, right? Sometimes people will feel like this is a past life thing, okay? But basically, it's not something from like your direct experience, but these parts are kind of adaptive and into the system because of your personal family history. And I'm gonna talk briefly about this because, and I almost hesitate to bring it up because it's so freaking rare. It's so rare. And I think more people believe that this is a thing when it is a thing, but it's not as big as people think it is. And that is what you would call like spirit possession, okay? Where it's something that's like completely out of like, it's not about your life. It's not about your ancestors' life. There's like something that like seeped in. There's a great book that I'm reading about this right now, but it's kind of confirming things that I've experienced or that I've seen with just like a couple of clients. But it's this idea that things can essentially kind of seep in and hook in, maybe if you want to call it the astral realm, the collective unconscious, right? IFS calls this unattached burdens, okay? But this is where you start getting into like shamanic work or like exorcisms or things like this. And it can come from a variety of places. It could be collective pain bodies, okay? Like truly from the collective, not necessarily from your direct lineage. It can be like a really negative thought that you had that just crystallized over time that's like no longer actually a part of you. It's kind of like its own thing. And this book that I'm reading right now by Robert Falconer, who's an IFS psychotherapist, talks about this phenomenon. And it seems like it can happen from if you leave your body, you disassociate during a very traumatic experience, or like commonly, apparently, like people that have gone under anesthesia for surgery might have something like this pop up. But again, it's not something to fear because the fear is actually kind of what hooks it in. And I know this because I had so many fears around this. Like I was actually having like crazy possession dreams. I was having very archetypal dreams. That's another thing too. There's another book by Donald Kalshed called Trauma and the Soul. And that's a more Jungian take on this phenomenon. But it talks about how severe trauma can open the psyche to like these archetypal energies. It's like trauma kind of thins the veil out and this protective system starts operating on this like mythic archetypal level. So this is what I mean by there's like also, right, some other parts that might be from the collective. It might be archetypal. It might be from some bullshit in the collective unconscious that's not really yours. And the key here is just recognizing when something's not yours and releasing it, okay? There is nothing out there that has more control over you than you do. So you need to remember that. Like your pure self energy is the most powerful energy in your system. So all of these things that might seem scary or dark or whatever, no need to fear, okay? These are things that can be easily worked with. But again, this kind of archetypal, collective, whatever you want to call it, unattached burdens, entities, possessions, okay, and the most scary word that you could use, it's actually like very uncommon, okay? And 99% of the time, if there's something in your system that feels kind of dark or scary, it's usually just those guard dogs that are protecting your golden shadow. But here's what you need to know, okay? Whether what you're experiencing is a protector, whether it's some inherited burden from your ancestry, or there's some like energetic hitchhiker, right, in your system, the medicine, it's still the same. It's curiosity, it's compassion, and it's a conscious relationship with this part. But I want to leave off on just like this hopeful piece. When you approach your parts with curiosity instead of fear or shame, they start to relax, they lose their grip, and behind them, you find this beautiful gold mine of your lost aspects of your true self, your true expression, your true personality, that child self, your creative spark, the sensitivity that was never bad in the first place, but that you repressed. Like the goal of shadow work isn't to slay your demons, it's to release your angels, okay? So here's a simple practice you can use. The next time you hear a harsh inner voice, or there's a compulsive behavior that you feel like you just must do, or you react in a situation that you feel like, oh my God, like, was that actually me? You want to sit down and you want to call in the part that said those mean things, wanted you to act in a certain way, and take it out, put in your mind's eye, take it out of your system, put it a few feet in front of you, get the image of what it looks like, what it feels like, the sensations that come up in your body when you connect with this part. And you want to ask them, like, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do your job? And then you just listen. And then you want to remind that part, thank you so much for protecting me, but I'm safe now. I'm an adult. I have other resources. I appreciate everything that you've done. And you will be amazed how quickly these dark, evil parts like transform with a little bit of acknowledgement and a little bit of like recognizing them and seeing why they had to do what they had to do to protect you. Because underneath every protector is an exile that is waiting to come home. And underneath every exile is your essence, right? It's your curiosity, it's your compassion, it's your ability to be connected and confident. That's your true self. That is your golden shadow. So again, if you've ever encountered something in yourself that you felt like was bad or evil, just remember you're not uncovering evil, you're uncovering light that has been hiding in the dark. But anyways, thank you guys so much for being here. I hope this resonated. And I would also like to invite you to my program, Reborn. It's totally on demand. It's currently at 9 modules where you go through the 8 layers of sexual shadow work, but it goes from everything from like your connection to your body to like your authentic voice. It's really a holistic shadow work program, and it is focused on sexuality because I have found people that have had developmental trauma, childhood trauma, it tends to show up the most in our sexuality and in our relationships. So that's why I created this program. It's honestly the program I wish I had 5 years ago. So I'm really excited about it. And if you join now, it's still in this like first round that I'm doing it as like an on-demand program, because before I did it live. So I'm testing out a pretty low price right now. Next year, I'm going to be adding more things to it. It's going to go up in price. But if you lock in right now, you're going to get all of that stuff that I'm going to add next year and lock in this lower price. And you'll also be part of the first group that's doing this with me on demand. So you'll get a lot more of my attention too, because I can still read everybody's comments in the modules and reply to them and check in on you. So yeah, if this is work that you're interested in doing, definitely check it out. I will put the link in the show notes. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.